It started with a pink slip of paper stapled to my brand new cedar fence, flapping like a threat in the wind. Violation 34A. Unauthorized fence installation subject to $1,500 fine. Signed with an unmistakably loopy, self-important signature. Karen Sheffield, HOA president. I remember just standing there, holding my morning coffee, staring at the notice. First, I actually laughed. I'd been back in the neighborhood less than 3 days after 6 months overseas Navy contractor work, classified mostly. And I'd built that fence with my own 2 hands using leftover panels from a job my crew had done last year. A job for this very HOA, ironically. That fence wasn't just up to code, it was the code. I designed it, but Karen, she saw a fresh target. Unapproved design. She barked when I walked over to her the next morning, holding her violation notice. Wrong color, wrong height, wrong wood. It's not on file with the association. I stared at her. This woman, round as a barrel, sharp as a blade, holding a clipboard like it was a royal scepter, was talking to me like I was some clueless tenant. Not the owner of Titan Fencing Company, the firm that had installed over 80% of the fences in her beloved Glenridge estates. I was polite at first. I explained who I was, offered to walk her through the build specs. I even pointed to the original HOA design plans that my company had donated 2 years ago as part of a neighborhood renovation project. Karen's eyes narrowed like I'd insulted her poodle. "We're done here," she snapped and spun on her heel. "Expect an escalating fine if you refuse to comply." That was the moment I knew this wasn't about fences. It was about control. Karen had ruled Glenridge Estates for 6 years, and from what I'd already heard from my neighbors' timid glances, whispered complaints, she ruled with iron bylaws and a gold-plated attitude. She fined retirees for having garden gnomes, wrote up single moms for sidewalk chalk, once threatened to evict a family for installing solar panels, calling it aesthetic terrorism. And now, she'd set her sights on me. Only this time, she picked the wrong damn target. I didn't just own the fence. I built the blueprint. I owned the contracts. I even had her signature on an old project invoice. But I didn't react immediately. I waited. I watched. 3 days later, I caught her with a tape measure in my yard again without permission. She was documenting evidence for a second fine. She didn't know I'd set up motion alerts with video. The footage, chef's kiss, her huffing and puffing in leopard print slippers and an oversized visor, tiptoeing through my hydrangeas like a cartoon villain. That night, I sent her a certified letter. Cease and desist. Formal notification of trespassing. A copy of the footage attached on a branded USB drive. Titan Fencing Company logo laser-etched across the front. She didn't respond. Instead, the next morning, she doubled down. My mailbox had 2 violation slips. One for aggressive conduct. Another for unauthorized signage. The sign? A tiny metal plaque at the base of my fence that read, "Crafted by Titan Fencing Company." Apparently that counted as a sign. HOA Rule 16B. And she was citing it retroactively. I'd had enough. It was time for a little public education. I made some calls. Set up a weekend neighborhood Q&A session, open lot, coffee and donuts on me. Posted flyers at the park and community board. Nothing confrontational. Just ask a pro, fence codes, violations, and your rights. Karen showed up fuming, arms crossed, standing right in the front with her inner circle 3 women with matching bobs and expressions like they chewed on lemons. I stayed calm. I walked the neighbors through basic HOA code, showed sample fence models, explained materials, and then pulled out her fence contract. "I actually built this one," I said, pointing to a blown-up photo of her backyard. Cedar slats, 6-foot frame, pre-stained. Built by Titan Fencing. And yes, it's the exact same wood as mine. Same height, same stain, same supplier. The crowd laughed nervously. Karen turned purple. "It's not the same," she shrieked. "Mine was approved." I held up the documents. Approved by Karen Sheffield. Signed off in 2021. Right here. The silence was glorious. But the twist? Oh, the twist came from the back of the crowd. "Excuse me," a calm voice said. Ms. Sheffield, why did you falsify your permit date? Heads turned. It was Marcus, a retired city planner who'd lived here 15 years. He stepped forward, holding a printout. This permit doesn't match the city record. Your application was submitted after construction. That's a retroactive approval. Karen stumbled. That's a clerical error. Marcus wasn't finished. You fined the Reynolds family last year for doing exactly the same thing. But you approved yourself afterward. Gasps. Murmurs. Someone whispered. She did the same to us with the deck. The dam had cracked. I stayed quiet. I didn't need to drive the nail home. The community was doing it for me now. But Karen? She stormed off mid-event. Spilled her coffee. Tripped on the garden hose I used for the landscaping demo. She nearly took out the whole refreshment table in her rush to escape. Someone caught it on their phone. Of course they did. By Monday, the footage had made it to the neighborhood group chat. Tuesday, local news. Wednesday, the city compliance office. That Friday, I got a call from the mayor's community rep. They wanted to do a piece on Glenridge's fence war, turn it into a spotlight on small-town HOA abuse. I agreed with one condition. We use it to educate homeowners about their rights. I wasn't in it for fame. I wanted accountability. By the time the HOA board called an emergency vote the next week, Karen was cornered. It was a packed room, standing room only. I sat in the back. Let the people speak. One by one, they stood, retirees, parents, even a few teens sharing how Karen had fined, bullied, or humiliated them. Gnomes, gardens, garage doors. One woman cried, describing how Karen threatened to sue her over an Easter egg hunt, disturbing peace. Then Marcus, calm and deliberate, presented the falsified documents. The crowd erupted. Someone yelled, "She owes us fines." Karen tried to speak, but for once, she wasn't allowed to steamroll. The vote passed. Immediate removal from her HOA position, pending investigation. A third-party management group was brought in until elections could be held. She left in silence. But before she did, she turned to me with eyes full of hate and hissed, "You think this is over?" I looked her square in the face and said, "Karen, it never even really started." Karen didn't vanish after the vote. That would have been too easy. Instead, she pivoted, started showing up at random community events, pretending nothing had happened. She'd arrive with cookies store-bought, barely unwrapped, and make small talk like she hadn't been ousted in disgrace just days earlier. You could feel the unease in the air whenever she entered. Conversations stilled. Laughter paused. I shifted, and Karen, in her puffed-up pink jacket, walked through it all like she still owned every inch of Glenridge Estates. But the truth? Her grip was broken. One by one, people started coming forward. Publicly, boldly. I wasn't even the one leading the charge. Anna Maria was the neighbors who'd been too afraid before. Old Ed from Birch Lane, who'd gotten fined $500 for painting his shutters non-conforming navy, only to find out Karen's own shutters were a shade darker. Melissa from Coral Street, whose son's trampoline had violated airspace ordinances, a rule Karen made up and enforced with a printed memo that had no legal header. Even Officer Daniels, our local patrol cop, quietly admitted Karen had called the station over 80 times in 2 years, mostly on families, mostly at night. When the HOA's interim management group started auditing past violations, the numbers were staggering. Over $42,000 in collected fines, most of it from completely fabricated infractions. And of that, nearly $12,000 had been unaccounted for. I knew what was coming next, and I knew it was time to dig deeper. With permission from the new acting president Marcus, the retired city planner, I offered my company's legal team to review the HOA's financial records. I wasn't doing it for revenge anymore. This had grown into something uglier, something that was hurting people. What we found made my stomach churn. Karen hadn't just bent rules. She had rewritten them, literally be editing official documents, fabricating approvals, and in some cases forging signatures. She had created fake community initiatives and transferred HOA funds into beautification projects that never existed. But worst of all, She'd used vendor accounts including Monito create fake invoices and route the money through a shell LLC listed under her nephew's name. The same nephew who'd shown up last summer driving a brand new Mercedes and claiming to be an investment consultant. The final nail came from a woman named Patrice, who used to work under Karen part-time during HOA events. Patrice came forward with a USB drive full of email records, internal messages between Karen and her so-called inner circle, planning fines, discussing families they wanted to clean up, and laughing at how easy it was to scare people with legalese and boilerplate threats. One message read, "Let's hit the new guy on Elm with a $2,000 citation. That military type, he won't push back. They never do." That message had been sent the morning after I put up my fence. I felt the burn rise in my chest like fire. We took the whole thing to the district attorney. The investigation was quiet at first. No one wanted to spook her into disappearing assets. But the DA was quick. Within 2 weeks, subpoenas were issued. Bank accounts frozen. Karen was pulled in for questioning. She stormed out of the station in tears. Cameras caught it. It hit the 6 o'clock news before she even made it to her driveway. And then came the unthinkable. She sued me, a full-on civil suit, claiming defamation, economic sabotage, willful conspiracy to destroy her reputation and livelihood. She served the papers herself, drove up in a filthy minivan, face flushed and shaking, shoved the envelope into my hands, and hissed, "This is how you'll remember me." I smiled, calm as ever. "Thanks for delivering it personally. Saves me a trip." The lawsuit didn't scare me. I'd been in federal hearings with classified materials. I'd briefed admirals, faced worse across oceans. But this was personal. And I wasn't going to let her rewrite reality like she'd done for years. My lawyer laughed when he read the suit. "This thing is held together with duct tape and delusion," he said. "We'll crush it." And we did. The court date arrived on a cold March morning. The courthouse was packed, neighbors, journalists, even HOA members from nearby communities curious to see the infamous Karen in action. She showed up in pearls and an oversized scarf, flanked by 2 attorneys she could barely afford. Her voice cracked as she made her opening statement about abuse and targeting, and how I manipulated a vulnerable woman. But then came our turn. We laid it all bare. The fake fines, the shell LLC, the altered documents, the money trail, the forged permits, and Patrice's emails, ones that painted Karen not as a misunderstood leader, but as a power-hungry tyrant who used fear as a tool and fines as a weapon. The judge sat in silence for almost 10 seconds before speaking. "This court finds the plaintiff's claims not only without merit but bordering on malicious prosecution. Furthermore, we are referring the case to the state attorney for potential charges relating to fraud, misuse of community funds, and harassment." Karen stood frozen. Then she crumpled, right there on the floor, sobbing. The bailiff had to help her up. She didn't look at anyone as she left the courtroom, not even her lawyers. 2 weeks later, the criminal charges dropped. 3 counts of HOA fund misappropriation. 1 count of document forgery. Civil penalties pending. The Glenridge Estates HOA issued a formal apology to all residents. Those fined under Karen's regime had their violations wiped, and in many cases refunded. A new board was formed. Elections were held. Marcus was elected president by a landslide. And me? I got a request from the new HOA board. Would I help draft the new neighborhood guidelines? Make them fair, balanced, respectful, centered on community, not control. I said yes. Not because I wanted power. Because I wanted peace. Because people like Karen thrive in silence and fear, and the only thing that breaks that cycle is when one person pushes back. That was all it took. 1 fence, 1 stand, and a community finally ready to say, no more. If this story lit a fire in you, if you've seen something like this happen in your neighborhood, and stay quiet. Speak up, challenge what's wrong, and tell us, was I right to fight back? Or did I go too far?